Shockwaves VideoCast, presented by
Bob Nalbandian,
host of the Shockwaves / Hard Radio podcast on hardradio.com and a Shockwaves Skull Sessions podcast on roadrunnerrecords.com / Skull Sessions.
Here with the great Brian Downey from Thin Lizzy. How you doing, my friend? All right, so now I gotta say something about Thin Lizzy and your drumming in particular. I mean, so many people distinguish Thin Lizzy with Phil's vocals, obviously, which was such a huge identity. And I just talked to Ricky and Damon about the guitars too, where the harmony guitars were definitely a staple of the Thin Lizzy sound. But something about your drumming was absolutely important to the sound of Thin Lizzy. I mean, I remember telling Adam after I saw the rehearsal with you guys when you came back, and no disrespect to Tommy Aldridge, he's obviously a fantastic drummer, but having you back playing the Thin Lizzy songs, I'm like, that's it. That's Thin Lizzy. Yeah. There are certain things you do or a certain style that cannot be replicated.
Right.
It is
I
really
think that goes.
I tell you that.
I think that's nice. Thank you very much. But I think that kind of goes back to the time I actually met Phil first when we had a band called the Black Eagles in Dublin, and when he was in that band, I used to go and see that band before I joined. And the bass player, a guy called Danny Smith. I always thought he was a fantastic player. Obviously Phil was influenced by him as well. But when he eventually sort of picked up the bass and started playing with the band, we kind of got this kind of thing together, where we discussed before we actually started playing how this rhythm section is going to sound. And from that time, I remember distinctly Phil was very conscious of getting a good tight rhythm section together.
Right.
And a lot of it was down to obviously listening to all our influences back then, from blues and soul and even touches of jazz and obviously pop music. And we used to sit down and practice together in our room, in the bedroom, wherever, and it became very tight. So a lot of that stuff came from those gigs way back with the Black Eagles, and sort of carried on now. Although he wasn't playing bass then, but we were still.
He was just a frontman singer.
He was a frontman singer, yeah. But then when eventually he decided to take up the bass when we formed Thin Lizzy, he really practiced quite hard to get his sound and his technique right.
All right. Well, I got to say, going back to the 70s, I mean, the Thin Lizzy sound was so enormously diverse. You talked about all your different influences, but a lot of bands from the 70s. You could go, Queen, UFO. Deep Purple, obviously Led Zeppelin, Nazareth. A lot of these bands that were in the hard rock metal kind of category were incredibly diverse. Every song was different.
Yeah.
And Thin Lizzy, absolutely. With every single album, you could do a blues song, you could do an Irish folk song, you could do and you could hit hard as hard as Judas Priest or Black Sabbath or any metal band of that time. And then you could do something like Fats or Dancing in the Moonlight, which is almost a Steely Dan-ish kind of flavor. Yeah, a little bit of jazz and everything. In the 80s, everything became so formulated with radio and MTV and all that. But going back to the 70s, writing-wise, it seemed like you just had the freedom to do what you wanted. Was that kind of the case?
That's absolutely true. That's exactly what it was about. But I mean, when we started off, the funny thing was, when we signed with Decca Records, we just got the freedom of the whole studio. I mean, they just let us do anything we wanted to do. And it was just incredible to know that you could go into the studio and play your stuff the way you wanted to play without any interference from the record companies. And that was the time you could do that. Right. Obviously, as you said, that changed in the 80s, and it became fairly, staid and formulaic. So, I mean, those days were really, really, I mean, I don't think we'll see those days again where you could have that. So.
Well, I gotta say, even through the 80s with Thin Lizzy, up into Thunder and Lightning, still the same formula.
Yeah.
Where you just, did what you wanted, and it had such a diverse. And that was a Thin Lizzy. You couldn't distinct the Thin Lizzy sound to one genre.
No,
and that was
you could. When John Sykes came in, I mean, John was a completely different guitar player than the rest of the guys. He was more heavy, you know, and that's obviously what we wanted. I know,
Right.
you know, we actually went out of our way to see John a few times before he came in. He was with the Tigers of Pantang at the time.
Right.
And I was just amazed when I saw John, you know, the first time I saw John. It just blew me away. And Phil, you know, he's starting to write a bit, you know, harder.
Right.
And, you know, and Chris Tangarides, our record producer, he sort of said, you know, I mean, why don't you just ask John and get him in? I mean, he obviously loved to join your band, and that's what we did. We approached John one day, and through Chris, and John said, yeah, you know, I'd love to play with you guys. So we got him down. We had a couple of days rehearsal with John, and he just fit it in so well. He really did. You know, it was just really good. And we went into the studio, and it was like, you know, a couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks rehearsal. Went into the studio, and absolutely no problem putting this stuff down. You know,
such a fantastic album.
Yeah, it's a really nice album.
You've worked. Talk about producers. You've worked with so many different producers. Thin Lizzy, of course, Chris Tangarides, John Alcott, Tony Visconti. What is some of your favorite producers working with Thin Lizzy?
Well, I quite honest, I thought, you know, Tony Visconti was really, really good.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony, you'd walk into the studio, you'd have the drums set up in a different part of the studio than you'd expect, and you kind of go, wow, what are we doing here? He said, well, I have these perspex screens. I'm going to put them around the drums to make them liver, make it sound live. So great, you know. So, you know, you come in the day after, and the drums would be somewhere else in the studio for a completely different sound. So he had great ideas about drums, and he was really, really good when it came to editing the tapes as well. You know, he's really. It was the days when you get the old razor blade out and you sort of, you know, chop a piece here and a piece there, and he'd be so precise, you know. But we didn't have to do that much, obviously. But I mean, there was some songs where, you know, he'd be experimenting. How about taking this verse out, maybe trying, you know, this and whatever, you know. So he'd do that, but the guy had just so many ideas, and you know, also, you know, he was really he was very experienced. I mean, so was John Alcott, but Tony seemed to have a lot of experience.
Yeah. With
David Bell, you know, the rest of the guys he worked with, you know. It was just great.
In 2005, he did the One Night in Dublin with Gary Moore.
Yeah.
And of course, Scott Gorham, Brian Robertson, the whole Snowy White.
That's right.
How was that experience? Can you talk about that?
Well, that was just an unbelievable experience. I mean, I got a call out of the blue from Gary, you know, and Gary, you know, he obviously used to call me up, you know, just to say hello, but this particular night he called and he said, like, I've got an idea, you know, Phil's 20th anniversary is coming up. I said, yeah, you're coming over? He said, well, I am coming over, but I want something to happen musically. I said, well, that's pretty good, you know, let's do something, because, you know, there was a Vibe for Philo happening then anyway.
Right.
So that was happening, but he said, you know, let's get something on a bigger scale than the Vibe for Philo. Let's get sort of a big auditorium like the Point Theatre in Dublin, and let's do something. And I said, yeah, why not? What do you have in mind? He said, just let's get Gary and Brian Robertson and Scott all together and just have a good concert. And he sort of arranged all that by himself. He called everybody up. He got all the video guys in, and he basically single-handedly organised the whole thing. And he was just great. So we had a couple of rehearsals, you know, and I did a whole show, and I knew he wanted me for the whole show.
Right.
There was no question of getting another drummer. But he wanted, obviously, guys to come on and play a couple of tunes, go off, and, you know, so Eric and they all came on, did one or two tunes, as you know. And it was just a great night, and the crowd loved it, you know, it was really fantastic.
Wow.
Audience, really,
great DVD.
Yeah, brilliant DVD, yeah.
Absolutely. You still talk to Eric Bell? Is he still active?
Yeah, you know, Eric lives in Ireland now, you know, he moved back from London,
right.
so he lives in, so that's where I live in Dublin, he lives in Cork. It's a bit of a distance, but I do see him. Right. We actually had for Gary Moore, in fact, we had this kind of a tribute gig in a place in Dublin called Whelan's, and we had a whole night there. So I played a rocker, and I played Whiskey in the Jar, and I played some other stuff. And it went down really well with Eric, and he's playing superbly.
All right. What's your favourite Thin Lizzy song to play?
Well, that's a really hard one. That's really hard. Well, I suppose, you know, Sha-La-La was a drum solo, you know, because it's a drum solo. But it's kind of hard to say. I mean, there's so many really good tunes. It's really, really hard to say. You know, just going back to the early first album, I suppose, Honestly Is No Excuse is a great song. You know, on the second, I mean, yeah, Vagabonds in the Western World, and going up to Angel from the Coast, you know, Romeo and the Lonely Girl, all those tunes. Johnny the Fox. I've got so many favorites.
I know this is a hard question to answer, but if Phil were alive today with Thin Lizzy in 2011, you know, obviously we talked about how diverse the sound was and how many different influences Thin Lizzy has. What direction do you see that album?
Yeah.
Would you...
You know, just before Phil died, you know, it's like, you know, before Phil died, he actually, you know, kind of asked me to come down to the house. Well, I was actually in London. I said I was coming over, and he said, yeah, come down, let's have a chat about a reunion, you know. So I said, well, that sounds pretty good, you know. So when I was there, he was saying he was doing all sorts of, you know, new tunes, and he had, like, you know, these kind of early rap kind of things going, you know. That,
wow. Yeah.
That, you know, it was just...
So this was 85?
This is about 85, yeah.
Wow.
About sort of maybe November '85, you know, just about a month before he died. But I mean, he had all these ideas, and he was telling me, you know, he was listening to all these diverse kind of tunes and music, you know. And I said, that's great, you know, because he obviously had Grand Slam there, and
right.
He was kind of trying to get off that kind of track, you know, and try something completely different. And I said, you know, that's just amazing. So he played me a couple of things on acoustic guitar. And he had lots of, like, you know, really quick-fire lyrics there, you know. It really sounded good, and you know, and I said to him, I'd love to get into the studio after Christmas and try some of this stuff, you know. He says, yeah, why not? Let's call the guys up and maybe we can organise something after Christmas, you know. But obviously that wasn't to be, you know. But he definitely had some new ideas coming out.
Speaking of new ideas, I know there was a problem as far as recording new material, but I understand you might be working something out to do some possible new Thin Lizzy materials.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Ricky has got some great lyrics lined up, and there's also some nice melodies knocking around that we know that's, you know, could be easily recorded. So, you know, hopefully, you never know, in the next 6 months we might get into the studio and try something.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Well, something definitely to look forward to. All right, definitely catch Thin Lizzy on tour with Judas Priest.
Cheers, man.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.